Alright, so here I'm starting on the leather, and I've gone ahead and base coated all the leather except for the belts with a mixture of black and um, dark brown oxide. Uh, Here I'm using the dark brown oxide mixed with a bit of the medium brown oxide, and I'm just going to stipple the lights onto it. Following, the shape of the volumes. You'll see when this dries that it dries a lot lighter than it is when it's wet. It's something to keep in mind. Um, but by just, placing little splotches, I'm going to start to build some rough texture to the leather here. I have two different kinds of leather to think about. I've got, the belts and this more rawhide kind of leather. And I want to, be able to distinguish the two. So one will be much more textured, and the other will be uh, a bit smoother of a dyed leather. Just going around and splotching some paint on could be very rough at this stage with a pretty large brush as I, just like the hair, as I move towards the uh, light, I will be more refined with it. The texture will get smaller, sharper, and that will give a depth to the texture, right? So creating a contrast through level of detail. So here now with just the medium brown oxide, again, going to layer that on top, still being pretty rough and splotchy with it. It'll show some of that previous texture through it, and as the texture begins to layer on top of each other, you get more and more uh, depth to the texture. Don't do this with a really nice, good brush. Use an older brush for this. In fact, let the kind of worn out bristles do some do some of the work for you, right? To create these little tiny scratches and marks. I'm here using some of the dark brown to just smooth out this transition a bit, create some more layering, and I'm trying to be very, very random with the directionality of the brush strokes. Now I'm painting some little lines going in random directions. These will create some more like finer, deep scratches in the leather, and also help soften some of this transition. So this is a rough look. I'm going to grab some of the light brown oxide, add that to my palette. And do the same thing, grabbing a mixture of the two. Now being a bit more refined, the brush is not as big here. Make smaller dots, and I'm going to start focusing on some of the edges where a lot of the wear would happen, and you'd start to see uh, some of the raw leather underneath the tanned hide. So I want to make sure that that edge gets a nice light on it. And again, a little mixture of stippling and tiny little short brush strokes and random directions help just layer this texture on top of each other. So on the edge, I will paint these little lines that start to crack inwards. They're like little splits in the leather where it's worn and been folded a lot. Starts to show, right, some of that hide underneath. Right, so grab some Vallejo smoke. This is a interesting color because it kind of functions more like an ink. It's like a dark sepia ink, but not quite as glossy. I can apply this over top in like a glaze. Uh, this will help unify and kind of add a little bit, just a touch of a sheen to the leather, uh, and knock back some of that texture that's too defined at the moment, right? So applying this all over in a kind of glaze, but also being a bit rough with it. So you see just how it sort of enhances the richness of the tone. You could also do something like this with the royal brown from Kimera. That's also a bit translucent, but it has a much more reddish tone to it than this does. This has a bit more of a yellowish tone. You can see just how much that kind of helps unify colors. And now I go back to the light brown and start to pick out some of these edges and add back in some scratches, layering back on top. And I know this is going to dry lighter than what it looks. So even my edge highlights here, I'm kind of stippling, like skipping the brush along the edge. I'm not trying to paint like a perfectly consistent brushstroke along the edge. I want it to kind of dance across the edge and create an irregular sort of pattern. I just want to glaze this part's a little too light for me, so I'm just going to glaze this back some. All right. All right, so here I'm going to grab some dark oxide and continue to layer up the edges, create even more deeper scratches and texture. This is what I mean with the kind of skipping edge highlight. I'm not trying to just paint a smooth brushstroke. I'm kind of stippling the edge highlight. Also painting in little scratches. You can see as it dries just how much sort of a lighter yellow it becomes. These little dots. These are much more. I'm not really painting the volumes here, right? The volumes was done before. This is more edge wear, right? What creating like weathering. Now the edge highlights do function to create definition between the skin and the leather, and also the different parts of the leather. But it's I'm not really painting the light. I'm more painting the uh, weathering on the leather itself. I made these little zigzaggy kind of brush strokes. This is like the leather's been rolled up and cracked. Little bends. All of these different kinds of dots and scratches and lines all just help to create more interest in and texture into the surface. So I'm happy with the weathering at this stage of the leather. So now I'm going to grab some of the cloudy sky that I used before in the beard. Um, just use some of that to mix with the dark oxide to lighten it up. And I'm going to paint some lights inside of the texturing. Don't need a lot of this. This stage is just to create some final bright highlights on the leather. So mostly be sticking to areas of light where you would catch some of those highlights. Add a couple small little scratches here and there, but not nearly as much layering of this stage as I did with the dark oxide. So with the dark brown oxide mixed with the smoke, I'm going to come in and paint some dark scratches along the cracks in the leather. This is going to add just a little bit more depth. I'm trying to follow the weathering I did. I don't want to use this everywhere, but just little touches here and there for some of the deeper ones to break up some of the edge and just add an extra little bit of depth. Analyze and double check, make sure all my lights are right, and then do any adjustments that I need to do at the end. Here on the belt, right where it curves up towards the light, I want just a little bit more light there.